What's going on, guys? So I thought this would be an interesting thing to comment on. Some people were asking me my opinions on it yesterday, and I hadn't got a chance to look at it or read it or see a translation whatsoever, but there's a couple of bits of information that have come out about Berserk from Kouji Mori himself. Now, if you guys don't remember, obviously all of you guys do, you're Berserk fans, you're here. But let me just reiterate, Kouji Mori is, of course, the mangaka that created the manga Holy Land and has been best friends with Kentaro Miura since they were very, very young. And Miura oftentimes was an inspiration for Mori in himself. He praises Miura very, very highly. He wrote a beautiful and, depressing, emotional little manga one-shot when Miura passed away about their friendship together and how he felt about it and everything. And, you can tell that this guy is a really good dude. You can tell he's a really good dude. He's an honest man, and that he's been best friends with Miura for a very, very long time. And probably Miura's death, as it affected all of us as fans, probably didn't affect anybody as hard as it did Kouji Mori himself. And regardless of how you feel about the continuation of Berserk post Miura's death, Kouji Mori is the guy that is most suited to lead the charge. He is the guy that's been as close to Miura than anybody else ever really has. They've talked about the story for over 30 years together. Miura shared ideas with him, ran ideas past him, asked him what he thought about it, and basically described and explained the entire story from start to finish during this entire 30-year period. And in fact, there's a couple of things in here that I think are very telling about that also. And so Kouji Mori has decided that he would help kind of lead the charge, tell Studio Gaga, the people that draw everything and shade everything, all of those guys, tell them exactly, where the story was going to go, how it was going to end up, and just try to get there as efficiently as possible. Obviously, it will never be the same. It will never be like it was with Kentaro Miura, but if we can at least, tell the story that was his life's journey, his magnum opus, his life's work, literally, like 30 years worth of work on this series, his main manga series. He did a little, other manga on the side, but they were very, very short. Berserk was his pride and joy. It was his main story. It was what he wanted to tell. It's what he wanted to share with the world. And I feel, as Kouji Mori feels, it's only right to see that it comes to its ending. And he said a couple of things about it here. Now, this is the first thing I pulled up is an afterword that's going to be at the end of Volume 42. So Volume 42 of Berserk comes out in Japan, I think, at the end of this week. It'll probably be another year before it comes out in the West or in America or anything like that. But it's coming out in Japan very, very soon. There's supposed to be an extra announcement alongside it, so we'll get to see what that is, hopefully in a few days too. But at the end of Volume 42, at the end of Volume 41, there was a little bit of an afterword from Studio Gaga. At the end of Volume 42, there's going to be an afterword from Kouji Mori himself. And there is a Google translated version of what he said here. So again, this is Google Translate, so you're going to have to take it with a grain of salt. But I think that it is very respectful, and I like what it has to say. It says, please pick up Volume 42, basically saying thank you very much for buying the volume, once you buy it, because this is the afterword at the end of the book. Says, from here on, this is Berserk without Miura. Just kind of letting people know. Also, Volume 42 will be the first volume that is entirely Kouji Mori and Studio Gaga without any Miura chapters that, Miura worked on personally. Said, so, of course, it will be incomplete, which I think is true. I think everybody agrees with that. I think nobody agrees with that more than Kouji Mori himself and Studio Gaga. We understand that we're not going to get a full 100% authentic Berserk experience without Kentaro Miura behind the pen. I've said this many times before, but there's just a way that every specific, unique individual draws and portrays something in their artwork that, as much as you mimic Miura's style, doesn't mean that the new artwork can't have emotion and depth and meaning to it, but you're losing that sense of soul. You're losing that, like, one specific person's vision, and you can capture and you can imitate it, but you can never replicate it, right? And I think this is basically Kouji Mori stating that, like, the people that have that opinion are not wrong. Like, it is not going to be how it was when Miura did it, but we're doing our best to try to complete the story. Says some people find that very difficult to accept, which is absolutely true. The Berserk fandom has definitely hit a divide, I feel like, since Miura's passing. And I feel like it's a very strong divide, or one that I never really felt beforehand. That's a whole other topic, but I do feel like the fandom just remarkably changed pre and post Miura's passing. And I think that this is just kind of like an acknowledgement of that. As a manga artist and a fan, I am a fundamental admirer of Miura. However, as the person closest to Miura and his best friend, the story that Miura tried to write, I can't leave it alone. Gaga staff, thank you for your forgiveness of that. Gaga staff and the people in charge as well. They're trying desperately to keep Miura basically kind of with us, right? To keep Miura's story going and to keep his journey going. Google Translate is not the most reliable, but you can kind of infer what he's saying about this. Like, he recognizes it'll never be the same. He recognizes that Miura is no longer here to tell the story the way that he specifically individually would, but we have Studio Gaga that was personally trained by him. We have Kouji Mori, who is Miura's best friend, and we're trying our best to keep his legacy and to keep his story alive, bringing it to its conclusion, you know, not dragging it out, not creating a bunch of extra shit, but like trying to get it to that natural conclusion point that was apparently in the works for quite some time. And he basically says that each book from now will be published like that. So he's acknowledging that starting with volume 42, this is the post-Miura era, and that's how it's going to be until the story ends. Everyone that loves Berserk, please keep your eye on them. If possible, we'll run to the end. I would be happy if you could support me and everyone involved in Berserk, to everyone who loves Berserk, with gratitude. So he's basically saying thank you, you know, for your continued support. Thank you for believing in them, believing that they can bring this story to its conclusion. And I think by saying run to the end, again, Google Translate, so whatever. I think he's basically saying we're trying to wrap up the story as quickly as we can without any kind of extra shit or bullshit kind of thrown in there. We're going straight along the lines of what Miura wanted to do and where Miura wanted to bring the conclusion, and that's what they're working on, you know? And he said that from the beginning, too. When there was the announcement last year, he was saying we're going to try to get to the ending, tell the ending that Miura wanted without adding in a bunch of his own stuff. He's going straight from what he knows the story to be until the end. And I respect that about him. I respect him not... You know, it's a respect thing, and it's good to see him not want to add a bunch of stuff. Like, what are my ideas for the story? Oh, I think I would add this in here. No, he's going like, this is what Miura said. You know, we might have to fill in the gaps here and there, but there's a natural conclusion point that he was trying to get to, and we're just going to try to get to it as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I like that. And what's really, really endearing is this little drawing that he did at the bottom of the screen here. I'm kind of blocking it, aren't I? And I think this goes along the lines of what Mori has kind of always said about Miura and how he kind of like looked up to him as an inspiration, because he's like, this is how a lot of our meetings would go. And you could see that he's asking Miura a lot of questions, and Miura is like over here on the left-hand side, you know, with a lot of detail and a lot of passion, explaining how he would do things and draw things. And then you have Kouji Mori on the right side, you know, sweating, kind of like, you know, grasping to understand how Miura is managing to pull off the things that he's pulling off, how he has the ideas that he has, how he draws the way he does. And it really is endearing, because it's kind of like just having that friendship of somebody that you really look up to and admire. And yeah, you're friends, but, you know, you just like see all the best in them. And like you see how they're able to do things and portray things and explain things in a way that you wish you could. You know, I don't know if like a lot of you guys have friendships like that, but I've had friendships like that too, where I just look at somebody and, you know, they're my friend. We're, you know, he respects me and I respect them, but they're just able to do things and accomplish things and explain things in ways that I only wish that I could, right? And I feel like this is kind of like a symbolism of that. So I think that that's really cute, a really endearing thing to put there. Now, there's also this little brief interview with Kouji Mori here, and this is, again, Google Translate, but unfortunately, it was not able to give me the whole thing because it's a paid article. What the fuck? Japan. What the hell? You gotta pay to read this? But thankfully, somebody did direct me to Reddit. So thank you, Reddit, very much for a little bit of a translation of it here. Thank you specifically to Tetrakarm. Thank you so much, man. A little bit of a translation of the interview here. A lot of the beginning portion is just the introduction, just explaining who, obviously, Kentaro Miura was, who Kouji Mori is, and everything. Here it says, you know, Mori was saying he spent more time with Miura than his own family. When they were in high school, Mr. Miura, who had excellent grades and is serious, and then there was Mori, who was more mischievous. Although the two had an uneven feeling, they had something in common. They both liked drawing manga, and they got along so well. So again, that's kind of going along with the lines of how Mori is describing his relationship with Miura and how he kind of like felt like he was a little bit more of the slacker, a little bit more of the mischievous one, and Miura was just kind of like knew exactly what he wanted to do. You know, he was good at it and proficient at it and just kind of went steadfast with his story over all of these years. Now, this part's really interesting. It says that Mori was not welcomed by his family and wanted to be free as soon as possible. With this in mind, he told Miura, "I will take possession of my country." And Mr. Miura had Griffith, the very important character in Berserk, say the same line. Mori said he was very embarrassed because the lines were basically word for word what he said, and he shouldn't get away with it, he told Miura. So that is kind of really interesting and funny, and I think that the line that he might be referring to in our like English translation is "I will have my own kingdom," kind of like wanting to be free, break out on your own, do your own thing, be in control, in charge of your own life. So that might be actually the line he's referring to. I don't know 100%. That's just my guess reading that, but I think that that's very interesting. And if that's true, that is literally like one of the most iconic lines that Griffith says through the entire story. Sorry, my cat went crazy. And then he talks about how when he was discussing with Miura, even about 30 years ago, so we're talking about since the incarnation of Berserk, or at least like early into the Golden Age, he headed to Miura's workspace, and he was telling him about the climax of Berserk. So even nearly 30 years ago, Miura knew the direction that he wanted to take the story. And you can tell that by reading it. You can tell that a lot of the story is very concise and leads up to particular moments and big, changing events that were put in place, and the seeds were planted early on, with the astral world taking over the entire world in the story. Early on, we were getting, story ideas and elements of how the astral world would seep into the physical world and things like that. There's always these little threads, these little breadcrumbs that you can follow back. And I think that that's why Berserk is one of the few series that doesn't really have a lot of, contradictions and retcons. Like a lot of things add up very, very well. Even things back in the Black Swordsman arc, back when Miura admittedly didn't have a 100% idea of where he was going with it, he still made all of that work. Like he found a way to make all of that make sense. Yes, all of it. Yes, even the front page. Okay, even the first page. Watch my video. Why did Guts clap demon cheeks? I'll explain it to you. So he says, after that, the story progressed towards its final episode with occasional additions of new characters and other elements. It has a grand worldview, and there are various foreshadowings and all kinds of devices to close the story. The story exists for the final episode. So basically right there, he is saying that this final idea, or where the story is going to eventually end up, or how it's going to end, has been put in place for a very, very long time, and everything has been leading towards it. The only thing that are different is he might have added a new character in. Maybe he didn't have a character like, I don't know, Isma in mind or something at first, but was able to add her in without contradicting where he wanted to go with the ending, or just maybe little detours, here and there. But like, we're getting to that end goal point. So it's really cool to see and really cool to know that that idea has been there for a very long time. Now, I have no idea what the fuck the ending of Berserk could possibly be, especially with all the story threads that are going on right now. But it's cool to know that there is an end goal, there is an end point, and I think that's very, very important. I think that's important for all stories. I hate when a story just kind of meanders around without any kind of goal, without any kind of progress, and you can tell that they're just making shit up on the fly and not actually working towards some kind of finale. So whether you like the finale or not, even something like Attack on Titan, obviously a lot of people didn't like that finale, but you can tell the story threads and breadcrumbs were there throughout the entire series. I feel the same thing about like Vinland Saga, which is on its final arc right now. You can tell that Yukimura had ideas and threads that are leading up to this finale, and he's had the finale in mind, and those always make a story feel more complete and more whole when you have an actual end goal and end point that you want to get to. So he also talks about how he also thought it would be impossible to continue Berserk without Miura. He was saying, without Miura, although I wanted to present the world in the idea that my best friend had in his head, I didn't want to create a mookbook. Basically, like, I didn't want to, like, do... He basically had, like, confliction with it, right? Like, he wanted to tell the story that his best friend was trying to tell for 30 goddamn years, but he didn't want to, like, half-ass it. He didn't want to, like, try to just make something up, right? He wanted to tell... because what Miura told him was so fucking awesome. He's like, that needs to be told in any way possible. But he just had to put something out there. That's the feeling that he had. And then he also talks about how Miura's finished manuscript was completed by his disciples, the Studio Gaga guys. They wrapped up that final, I think it was 360. what chapter was it? 360 something? I don't know. The final Miura chapter. So they finished it up. It was the last chapter that Miura worked on. And he's saying that their enthusiasm changed his mind, and he thought maybe he could do it. I thought that Miura would be angry with me if I didn't do anything, so I made that decision. Mori, who knows the story up to the final episode, supervising the final work. So that's basically saying, from what he knows about Miura and being best friends for 30 years, also being the only person that knows the ending of the story, also seeing the work and effort that Studio Gaga put into it. And there was definitely a time period where Berserk might have been canceled. Like, that might have been the final chapter. But I think two things happened. I think that one, he knew where his best friend wanted this story to go, and he knew that his best friend wanted this story to be complete. And so he had that in his mind, and it was something he was wrestling with for a very, very long time. He's like, I know how to end this, but should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? What would Miura want me to do? And he felt like Miura would be upset with him if he didn't do it. If he didn't, like, you're the only person that knows this. Like, you have to do this, you have to do this for me. Along with seeing the effort and work that Studio Gaga put into it and all of their artistic talent. And it's, some people like their artwork, some people don't. I think it's good. I think it's close enough. And you have all this combination of elements. You have the people that can replicate Miura's artwork who literally studied under him. You have Miura's best friend that knows the ending of the story. And then you have Miura, who spent his entire life, 30-some years, creating this story and reaching towards this end goal point that he had in mind for so long. And you know that he wanted to end his story. You know he wanted to get to the finale of Berserk. And you have all of these elements together. It only makes sense to finish it. And there's always going to be people that feel differently. And I understand that, and I respect that. But I think given all of the evidence that we have and all of the knowledge that we have, and just being on this journey with these characters, I just want to see this come to a conclusion in any way that we possibly can. And I think that we have the best people for the job working on it. I don't think there's anybody in the world more suited to this than Studio Gaga and Kouji Mori. And he basically wraps it up saying that I wanted to try my best, and I will only do what I remember what Miura said to me and pass it on. So, like he said, he's not adding in any kind of extra elements. He's not adding in his own flavor. He's not doing anything other than just replicating what Miura told him, where the story needs to go, and Studio Gaga is filling in the pieces. Now, when it comes to writing the dialogue, I don't know if Mori is like specifically writing the dialogue or if Gaga is doing that also. I actually think it might be more Studio Gaga, and I think that Mori is basically giving them like the manuscripts, basically saying, these are the things that need to happen. This is where the story is going. This is how it's going to end. And they have to, figure out a way to tell that visually. But I think they're also adding in bits of dialogue too. But that's kind of that's the part that I wonder the most at, because with a story like Berserk, there is a lot of lore elements to explain. We still have to explain things like, the full story, backstory of Skull Knight and things that are going to require explanation and dialogue. And I'm wondering if that's, all coming from Mori or if it's just a collaboration in the explanation of the dialogue. I don't really know. But what I can say is that I respect the hell out of Kouji Mori for attempting to take this on, because this is a huge burden on his shoulders. He could have just not done this, He could have just not done this. And, ever since Miura's passing, I really do feel like there's been a split in the fandom. And I guess I don't know if I really want to talk about that in this video or not, but I think that I've seen a lot of hate, a lot of negativity, a lot of beasts of darkness kind of on display since the passing of Miura that I don't feel was there before. I mean, there was always, obviously, there's toxicity in every fandom, but I do think that Berserk, over any other fandom that I've ever been involved in, as far as manga, anime, what have you, I always felt like the Berserk fan base was the most chill and most calm overall, minus like a subset, of fans. But I think for the most part, it's a story that gravitates towards people that, understand pain, that have gone through shit in their lives. I feel like people that casually like Berserk are people that just kind of like, the fight scenes and giant swords and demons and stuff, and they're like, oh, that's cool. But the people that really vibe with it, the people that really resonate with it, I feel like everybody has a story of some kind of crazy thing that happened in their past, some kind of super depressing thing, losing friends, losing loved ones, something that happened to them when they were younger, something that was really, really hard for them to go through. They were going through some kind of depression or some kind of breakup or some kind of like loss in the, like everybody that's gone through, you know, some kind of trauma in their life, I feel like finds some kind of resonance with Berserk that like makes it mean so much to us, right? It's not just like a story that's like, oh, that's cool. It's like they're really, really passionate about it. And that passion, you know, permeates through everything. I mean, it's the reason why like the Berserk videos on my channel get like 5 times the amount of views as any other video I do. It's because the Berserk fandom is just so passionate. But I feel like post Miura's passing, there has been like more and more fans. Maybe because I don't know if more people jumped on it afterwards. Maybe they heard that he passed away and they were curious about it, or I don't know what it is. But I feel like there's just a lot more toxicity now than there ever was before. There's a lot more arguments. There's a lot more, you know, just edgy jokes, you know, over and over. And I don't really know where it came from. But I think that for the most part, I think for the most hardcore Berserk fans, I mean, I think we're still there. And I think that we're going to follow this through to the end, or as far as we can possibly get. Because overall, it is about the journey. It is about the struggle. It is about trying to find those resolutions and trying to overcome whatever it is in our lives that we can overcome. And watching Guts go through his pain and his struggle, I think helps a lot of people in their lives. And you know, our lives and our situations might not be as dramatic or intense as Guts, but we sense the same kind of energy, right? And we can use that as motivation. So I think we're still there, man. I think the good Berserk fans are still here. And I think that for the most part, whether you agree with the continuation of the story or not, I think that there's a lot of respect and admiration to go towards Kouji Mori, because this is an undertaking that is extremely stressful. I'm sure he's trying to do the best job he possibly can with it. He's trying to respect his best friend of 30 years who passed away unexpectedly, while at the same time trying to make a story that satisfies the fans, while at the same time now is going to be responsible for the ending of Berserk. And even though this is Miura's ending, and we know this, even though if people don't like the ending, or they hate it, or if it's like an Attack on Titan situation and everyone rebels against it, he is going to be the one that gets all the blame. You know, all the pressure is going to be on him. And this is pressure he did not need to undertake. You know, this is not even his manga. So because of all that, I really, really respect him. And I like that he's speaking out and giving his honest thoughts and saying like, hey, man, I didn't even know if I wanted to do this. You know, I wasn't sure if this was the right thing to do, but he contemplated on it. He saw the work that Gaga was doing. He thought about what his best friend would want. And this is the conclusion he came to. So I respect it. Anyways, guys, I've ranted too long. Thank you for watching this video, man. I really appreciate it. Give it a like and a comment to help it out in the algorithm if you would. Tell me what you guys think about the interview and the little afterword in volume 42 here. Tell me what you think about it. Other than that, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.